victory and the agony of defeat.
Madison, great ball around the corner, Petticini, he beats them all! Junior Polar out wide, bumped away from Trindle, Sharks coming through, none of them can hold him!
Alrighty, we're back. Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is John, also known as 4020, and joining me for an offline edition of the tip sheet is my good mate Sixties. Big fella, I feel like we're live far more often than we're not these days. It is always nice to have a stress-free, simple old recording, and we're here on a very lovely Thursday. Actually, the weather's cleared up beautifully to talk about junior rep football. But as the NRLers want to be these days, we can't just talk and preview games, because between now and our news podcast, which was already a whopper, there's been more Parramatta news, more NRL news. I don't know if we can keep on top of it, mate.
Yeah, well, it's certainly a struggle to keep podcasts under 2 hours, which
we have issues by ourselves or just yapping. Exactly. But
we'll make the guarantee. We've just got the 3 junior rep matches this week. Now, before we do, as this is a special junior reps preview, which we've been doing over the last month or so, and of course we'll give a shout out to the great supporters of Junior Rugby League in the Parramatta District, which is Parramatta Eels Club. So this special podcast each week is brought to you by Parramatta Eels Club, and they are such a wonderful organisation with their community spirit and the way they give back to the community, and also the way they make it so affordable for junior players and their families, for the young kids to be able to play rugby league. Their grants that go out to all of the clubs go straight into reducing registration fees and insurance, that sort of stuff, of the players. So big shout out and thank you to the home of the Eels, Para Leagues Club. And don't forget, the Para Leagues is the home of the Eels. So whether it's a home match or an away game, you get down there and you can look at the Eels on the big screen in Stirlows, where you find us on home match days. This week, it's an away game against the Tigers, but of course it's at Combank Stadium, so there'll be plenty of people in there at Stirlows. Get in there before the game, get in there after the game, just enjoy talking football and catching up with fellow Eels supporters and watching some of the football action on the big screen, then get over to Combank and enjoy the game itself. So, John, busy week, as you said.
Never ends, mate.
Well, I've been up to training tower. I have to say as well, got to spend a bit of time in person with our good mate Chris Ricketts. And most of the time when he's joining us for the podcast, he's over there in Austria.
That gorgeous mountain backdrop.
Yes, so he's there for a little while before he moves to Chicago, I believe it is, I think that might be happening around mid-year.
If the Parramatta Eels don't break him, the Chicago Bears will. So poor man is not moving to a healthy sporting environment over there.
Well, so anyway, it was great to catch up with Chris, and then after they finished training, Riley Smith come over and said g'day and had some photos with Chris and his son Sam. So that was fantastic. And I might just put up, I'll put up a photo of that. And I do have another interesting photo that I'm looking at sharing, which is the jersey that Chris has got organised to wear to the game on Monday. And
he might not get to Chicago if he wears that jersey, let alone back to Austria.
Yes. Given it's a Tigers home game.
Oh, no.
And Tigers supporters there will probably outnumber Eels supporters by virtue of the fact it's their home game and their season tickets and
get priority
and
exactly.
all of that. Yep.
So
all the priority ticketing that goes their way. But so I'll look at sharing that on our socials. So stand by for that. But John, as you mentioned, just before we get to the previews for the junior reps matches, and we got 3 of those. the big news today with Joe Offengaue's immediate release to the English Super League, and it's. I think in the long term, it wasn't necessarily a surprise that he would go to the English Super League. The fact that it's happened now and like an instant release is what's caught certainly Eels supporters by surprise. Maybe it also caught the Eels management by surprise as well, because these sorts of things develop very quickly in terms of, being given an offer and then having to seek permission for an early release for an offer. But that's pretty much what transpired in this instance. So what's your thoughts, John?
I agree. It definitely came. It's that sort of duality where it came as a surprise from a salary cap perspective, I guess, but not as a surprise from a methodology or sort of vision angle, where it's pretty clear that Jason Riles has a vision for this team. He is willing to make pragmatic calls to get this team younger and faster and fit. Fit is probably not the right word, but you know what I mean. More energized with young talent, and that's come at the expense of a number of senior players. We saw coming into this year, Gufferson, Sevo, and Campbell Gillard all departing from the club. And look, Gufferson wasn't forced out. That was more of a not wanting to take on a different role, which I'm not accusing Gufferson of being wrong about. He's still a great fullback. That was just a difference of philosophy there. But you do see a vision from Jason Riles here, Sixties, and I am surprised by how this developed without any indication of it coming, I suppose, which, again, there's probably been more of Parramatta's strength in recent years than it hasn't. They've run a fairly tight ship when it comes to recruitment, negotiation, and those sort of things. And we've had a couple of drawn-out sagas that have allowed for headlines, but in this case, it obviously came on very fast. I'm hoping that part of the reason it came on fast is that Joe had secured or was in the process of securing a good long-term deal elsewhere, and that's helped facilitate this step. Because from a 2025 perspective, it doesn't really help us, does it, Sixties? You're losing a senior player. Look, Joe's form hasn't been setting the world on fire, but he was one of our most consistent and reliable players in season 2024. He comes to be in a team that is very young and has a number of out-of-form senior players. He was one of the few players that was picked as a senior player week in, week out. So that obviously changed this week when he was named to reserve grade. But it came on really fast. It puts the Eels in an interesting situation now too, because I put out my instant reaction to it on the blog Sixties, and someone asked me, what does this mean for the Eels in terms of the cap? And the NRL salary cap window, the salary window starts in November, right? When the players report to preseason training, and then their pro rata salaries begin to toll from that point. So we are coming into the end of April right now, which is essentially a half year in terms of the league financial year. And that means that whatever Joe is on, he's being paid pro rata, essentially half his contract. And we're not privy to any severance package, whether he got more of his salary as an advance for being released or if it's just being clean cut. But the Eels have a couple of options here. That money can be rolled into an extension on another player as part of a top-up to this year, a restructuring of their current year salary. I know the Daily Telegraph has mentioned that there's a quartet of players either re-signing or close to re-signing the Eels in Will Penasini, Sam Tuivasa, Tony Mattielli, and Ronald Volkman. So a very good quartet of players there to keep around. Obviously, you can promote a player. You can go recruit a player. It doesn't have to be a young half that's on the market now. It could be a player that's a like-for-like for Joe. And the other thing too, which was revealed last year, and it's not really spoken about as much as I thought it would be, there was a rival club, I think it was Cronulla, who during the year revealed that up to 5% of your salary cap can now be rolled over in the salary cap. And that means that based on the figures, I think it's an $11,400,000 salary cap this year, 5% of that should project to $570,000. So they could also, if that information is correct, they could also put that money towards pulling it into the 2026 salary cap. So a couple of interesting options there for the Parramatta Eels, Sixties. Yeah,
so just on a couple of things, I'll work from last to first with what you were talking about then. Yeah, the minimum spend on each team's salary cap is 95% of the cap. So that's that 5% that's
been public knowledge for a while, but I thought that originally the way it was worded was I thought that that meant 5% could go to operational expenses or would just be in the club's pocket, but it actually rolls over to the next year.
Yeah. So there's that. On Joe himself, 100%, he was one of the we actually had him in contention, ourselves, our opinion, in contention for the Ken Thornett medal last year. Such was his level of consistency. And coming into this year, yes, we've seen Riles look to debut as many young players as he can. Whether this is, my understanding is it was probably going to be unlikely that Joe was going to be offered a contract going forward. Now, that would then mean if he's been told that, which that's my understanding, then naturally he and his agent would be looking around for what are my options for 2026. So my understanding is that there was an offer that came in from an English Super League club, but it was conditional on being able to get an immediate release to join them now, and hence why this happened so quickly. I don't know that he was necessarily going to be named in New South Wales Cup were it not for this. So I think that naming probably has more to do with that if we were getting close to that point where he was going to be released. There was probably, I would imagine there was probably just a little bit of final paperwork just to be sorted out around the time of Team List Tuesday. So we now see him go off to England. Certainly on behalf of the Cumberland Throw, we thank Joe for his services at the Eels because, as we said, he was one of the most consistent players last year. He was a leader in amongst the group, looking to hold them together in what was a tough time. He had quite a good game on his on his milestone game against the Seagulls, wasn't it? That where he got the try. So what was that? That 200 or 250?
200, yeah.
200. So his 200th game, and that's a great achievement. So he now leaves the NRL as a 200 first grade game veteran, and once you start getting up into those numbers, it's an elite few that get to play such a long career. So congratulations to Joe on that. Thank you for being an Eel, mate, and we really wish you and your family well over there in England. He's probably going to enjoy the latter part of his career and getting to experience a different brand of rugby league, plus also see a little bit of the world, certainly a lot of Europe. And, it'll probably be a great finish to his career for him. I reckon he will excel over there, absolutely excel.
No doubt.
Okay, so, mate, let's get into our junior rep previews now. And, of course, it kicks off in the Lisa Fiaola Cup. Let's now mention...
Yeah, there is an important change to the sequencing this week, because originally these games were billed to be at... which venue was it again, Sixties?
It was the Blacktown.
Blacktown, that's right, yeah.
Recreation and
correct.
Sports
Part of the Rudy Hill complex, exactly.
Yeah, part of the Rudy Hill complex. It's now been moved to the Parker Street Reserve in Penrith. Now, we don't know too much about that ground. We know that
been there.
New South Wales Cup is being played there by Penrith this year. We don't know very much about the facilities, but it is just a local ground up there. It's probably got a little bit more, a tiny bit more facilities than maybe some of the local club venues, but maybe not too much more. John, what I really want to say about this is there are obviously issues this year with ground availability that's being faced by clubs, but definitely by the New South Wales Rugby League. I can't believe that we're playing an Elite Pathways finals match in just a local ground in the Penrith district. I mean, besides the fact that this is, it's not a Penrith final, like it's not they're not like a home team. They haven't earned home team status. They've got there's two teams from Penrith, the girls teams there. I think in terms of which is the top seed, that's split between the Eels and Penrith. I think in
between Fiaola
Lisa
and Gale,
Fiaola,
yep.
Eels would be the top seed. In Tarsha Gale, I think Penrith might have finished fourth. I think we finished fifth, something like that.
And in the SG Ball, the Eels are hosting an interstate team. So
yes, so so Penrith aren't even involved in the SG Ball. So and Penrith aren't involved. Didn't make the finals in SG Ball or Harold Mats. They finished 13th in Mats and 12th in Ball. So I'm not quite sure how we're all the way out there because it is deep in Penrith territory. It's not like on the boundary with Parramatta.
No, it's not Blacktown, which was
no. So there are obviously major venue issues. This has been a late change because the Rooty Hill venue was not declared until Monday as the venue, and then no sooner was it up than like we were starting to hear word that it was going to be changed, and here we have this change that I think was made yesterday. Well, it certainly wasn't. I didn't see any publicity around it until yesterday when it appeared on the New South Wales Rugby League website, I believe, yesterday. But and my apologies if it appeared any earlier. But John, it can't be a case that there is nowhere else for them to play.
I mean, Ringrose Park exists, and it's one of the better park football facilities across the New South Wales Cup.
But maybe it's a case of they might be booked in for all the junior league that's played there with Wenty. We don't know, but it has to be. It has to be that there are major venue concerns. However, you have to think to yourself, how long have they known that these dates are going to be there for Elite Pathways finals? This is not,
it's an every year fixture. Like this is
the top of the heap, and it's the second week of finals, and I just find it, I think this is something where the New South Wales Rugby League should be putting out some sort of information to the public about what's going on with this, because I honestly don't think it's good enough. It's certainly as a venue, we haven't gone there. We're looking at what we've researched there and people we've spoken to, etc., about what is this venue like. And whilst we're always having a bit of a moan about Leichhardt Oval and trying to find parking and what have you, in terms of a venue for junior rugby league, once you're there, and let's say once you're there, it's up to scratch for that level of football. Maybe not NRL football, but certainly Pathways football. But man, you've got to have, has this ground got a stand of any aspect in any way? I don't believe it does. I could get out there and be proven wrong, but I don't believe there is any sort of significant spectator facilities. But anyway, we wait and see. We'll stop the moaning because we do want to get on with the preview, and we're probably about 20 minutes deep into
19 minutes deep now between the Joe news and then getting fired up about the logistics behind the draw.
Yeah, my apologies, people. We should have just got straight into this, but
let's dive into the first game, Sixties, because like you said, 3 Parramatta teams in action. Unfortunately, the Harold Matthews did bow out last week, and they kick off the Eels at 10 o'clock a.m. with a game against the Penrith Panthers in the Lisa Fiaola. Parramatta coming back against the Central Coast Roosters last week, but not quite enough to punch a ticket directly through to the grand final qualifier. So now they take on their Western Sydney rivals. At fullback, we have Ire Sevilla. You got Sienna Bonello and Freedom Crichton Rapati on the wings. Georgia Wanzi and Cody Tuamasevi round out an unchanged 1-5. Sharon Latapu and Tamika Withers also again your frontline first choice halves pairing there. Mere Sivo starts alongside Isabella Bell in the front row. Bowie Marchong is at dummy half. Kaiser Morgan Pritchard and Mitzi Cairns are on the edges with Katia Duff at lock forward. Again, a lot of familiar faces there. 60s, pretty much Parramatta's frontline picks there. barring Leonie Ave being unavailable, unfortunately. And then on the interchange, you've got Alicia Meza, Olivia Saba, Evelyn Kwendu, and Kaivinia O'Callaghan-Ahio. Extended roster has Hine Rakiti and Halo Talangi. And they're taking on, as I said, the Penrith Panthers, trying to see if there's any second-generation names that are jumping out there. We've got Anita Rapati. Who else we got there?
You got a Hiku.
Got a Hiku, got a Latu, got a Fafita. And these could not be, obviously, familial connections to existing rugby league players, but we know in rugby league that a lot of times there is, whether it's like cousin or directly ties to the same surnames. So, yeah, Eels taking on the Panthers here, 60s. These two teams did meet earlier in the season, if I can just go pull up my draw in the Lisa Fiaola. And they met, where was it? Back in round 6, where the Eels delivered probably their most impressive performance of the season in a 46-0 shutout out at Eric Tweedale against the same team. Obviously, a lot can change in the space of just a week, let alone the 6 or so weeks it's been since then. But we mentioned with the Tarsha Gale before 60s that being forearmed and forewarned is often key. And it didn't work out that way for our SG Ball or the Harold Matthews, but maybe it works out this way for the Lisa Fiaola this week.
Yeah, that was a really comprehensive victory. I mean, I'm stating the obvious with the score, but it was, I think at that point I said it was the best performance that we'd seen of the season, and the girls had had some good wins earlier in the season, but I thought they were quite exceptional on that day. John, last week the girls were on the back foot from the start in that game against the Central Coast.
In an 18-point hole in 14 minutes, yep.
Yeah. Now, we talked about how that came on the back of some uncharacteristic errors, which was turning possession and over in good territory to their opponents. And they got momentum that was almost hard for the Eels to stop. And to be fair as well, the Eels looked completely rattled during that time. It was actually, I was pleased that they were able to hang on and things didn't get worse before halftime. Like, I almost took that 18-0 deficit at halftime because of how things were looking in that first half, because the Roosters looked so dominant and looked like there was going to be nothing that was going to halt the momentum. It seemed that the Eels were, they couldn't get out of their own way in their attack. They come out after half-time last week and it was all, you could see there'd been a change in, if there hadn't been a change in the match plan, then it was getting the girls to focus back on what the match plan was,
yep.
Which was they played very direct. They kept hunting in behind the ruck, and the change that brought to the game was real. It was tangible. All of a sudden, it went from the Roosters being in total control and completely dominant to this was a real contest. And the Eels got back 2 tries early. They had a rough period of having a sequence of penalties and possession go against them, and the Roosters kicked ahead again by a converted try. But then the Eels got another try not long after that. But even though they were now dominating, they just couldn't get the extra scores that they needed to pull back the lead. So, they ended up going down, 24-14, 4 tries to 3. But considering it was 18-0 and considering Parramatta could only convert one of their tries, it was a really good comeback that I think provided a good launch pad for this week's game. Look, we've said before, John, that this is a well-balanced team that's there. The forwards show what they can do when they play directly. And then, they've got enough strike power out there in the backs that they can play off that platform and stretch opponents. And the wingers have done a great job this year when they've been given opportunities. Someone like Freedom as well, she'll create opportunities even for herself. She's a threat in yardage. And I'm just trying to think back whether I have it in the back of my head that she caused all sorts of chaos for Penrith when they last played. I think it was against them where she made a couple of real long distance breaks against them. So I'm expecting a win. I'm not going to go into forecasting what sort of margin or anything like that, because the girls definitely can't get ahead of themselves, especially after losing last week. But they're a team that deserves to advance to the third week of the finals, and I think they'll do that. What would you like to add to that, mate?
Yeah, well, they're a team that, again, at their best, and they have there is a mammoth shadow hanging over this competition in the form of the Bulldogs. But at their best, they're right up there as one of the better teams in this competition. And as we've said with the Harold Matthews, with the Lisa Fiaola, with the Tarsha Gale, and then as we saw with the SG Ball, who were being damn near perfect up until last week, your own errors are going to really limit how good you can be in a given game, in a given week, in a given year. And we saw the worst of that for the Eels on Sunday at Leichhardt, and in 20 minutes we saw the worst of that for the Harold Matthews, for the Lisa Fiaola. They got on top of that, and once they did, the game completely changed. And from there, it was 14-6, right? Once they got a lid on that, and it wasn't a little 10-minute passage of play. It was about 35, 40 minutes in totality where they managed to roll up their sleeves and get back to the plan. So if they do that, I think that they're every chance of taking the win. Like you said, it is very difficult to predict point tallies now, because who's going to wilt in the sort of pressure cooker that is finals football. Maybe both teams stand up and deliver a real cracker. I don't know. But the Eels obviously match up well against the Panthers, at least they did 6 weeks ago. I think, like you said, Freedom Crichton-Rapati is such a standout. There is no way she has back-to-back bad games like she I say bad games. She had a bad 15-minute 60s in that game last week. She will be back to her best. I'm quite confident in that. I think that's going to be a massive boon for the Parramatta Eels. I like you said, it's a well-balanced team. I think the centres are quite talented too. Wanzi and Tumaseve have done great throughout the season. The halves and Latapu and Withers are very complementary. Obviously, Ballymar Chong's dynamic at a dummy half, so if her forwards can give her the opportunities, she will punish the Panthers, and that means that the likes of Sivo and Bell, Saba, Kuendu as well, and then O'Callaghan, Ohio off the interchange, those three. I think they're going to be crucial for that. And then just the halves getting the back rollers involved, because I think that was missing last week, 60s, was our back rollers who have been probably our most potent channel for points, or consistently for points, were probably even nullified by Parramatta's own actions and perhaps something of what the Central Coast Roosters did, but they weren't a big enough factor. So I think you need to get Morgan Pritchard and Cairns back into this one. And
John, last week, we looked so uncomfortable and disjointed in attack that I couldn't work out what any match plan was last week. And as I said, that changed significantly in the second half, where it was so obvious that not only was this the plan that they probably should have had at the start, or should have followed at the start if they just weren't adhering to the coach's instructions, but it was the correct one. Now, that was using the Eels, one of the aspects of the Eels' strength in that forward power. But as you said, there's strike weapons around this team in a number of positions, great balance. I'm expecting them to be focused from the start this week. We can put aside just being, and you've used this word many times this season, John, because it rings true, where a team just gets ambushed. And by that we mean the opposition just comes out ripping and tearing and putting their opponents on the back foot right from the start, to the extent where it's like they're shell-shocked and they're not sure, the game plans go out of the mind. they're just doing their best to survive. They're all of a sudden their mindset is negative rather than positive. So we want them on the front foot right from the start. So I do expect that they will this week, and I think there's a lot to be confident about with them getting the victory over the Panthers. Which, John, then brings us to the Tarsha Gale, where the Eels again take on the Panthers.
Yes, funny how it matched up this way, isn't it? 60s, 11:30 a.m. kickoff, 11:30 a.m. kickoff out of Parker Street, and the Eels come into this one having to play sudden death football last week, and they stood up to the occasion with a massive 32-12 victory. They were very impressive 60s, and that came on the back of I would say it was a breakthrough win against the Bulldogs in the final round of the regular season, where they really found an identity, I think, in terms of getting gritty and being willing to compete. And I think it puts them in good...
It was a statement game. It was a real statement game,
yeah.
John.
Yep. It's really... I think it was obviously, I mean, it's stating the obvious, but it was a critical point for them in the season. And I think being able to knock over the Bulldogs, who have been such a Goliath in both the Fiaola and the Gale, the way they have in such a fashion, set them up for that win last week. And now, because of that, they go into this game against Penrith with a real shot of going through to the grand final qualifier. But to do that, this is the team that will take on their Western Sydney rivals. At fullback, it is Dallas Graham Wivel. You've got Sualo Lafonga and Avinya Rakomangada. I was going to do the winger centre pairings, then I panicked. So we go just the wingers there. 2 and 5 there. Then you got Sammy Lee Gunn Ta'awai and Aaliyah Scrivens in the centres. You got Kylie Gray and Aaliyah Sufan in the halves. So we've got a change there of Scrivens, who's played wing most of this year, right? 60s.
John, she could probably play anywhere. Like in all seriousness,
talented young player for sure, and a handy goal kicker too. So that is a nice little set of skills there. But in the halves, I mentioned Kylie Gray and Aaliyah Sufan. Front row, Tess McWilliams and Taylor Falanico. Ava Jones, dummy half, so unchanged there. Taylor got the 16 on her back, but she has been the starting bookend all year with the 16. Then you've got the back row pairing, Fontaine Tafua and Matoisha Kalepo, with Riverley Arlaw rounding out their pack, which I believe is unchanged, and they were in tremendous nick last week. Obviously, we spoke glowingly about Riverley, but that entire starting pack, McWilliams, Falanico, Tafua and Kalepo, all got the job done really, really well, and obviously Ava Jones still a dummy half. Then on the interchange, you got Armani Lee Ava'e, Rory Muir, Liliette Tapuli and Alana O'Loughlin, extended roster, Anahira Payikau and Shia Tokolic. And yeah, I'm pretty certain that's a 1-17 from last week, 60s. Although
with the exception of Aaliyah.
With Aaliyah, sorry, yeah, which I did actually mention at the start. And then I jumped the gun there. So didn't jump the Sammy Lee gun though. So we got one change in the team there. And Aaliyah is a big in there, bringing a lot of balance to that back line. Taking on a Penrith team, again, you look for those second-gen sort of players. We've got an Elford. We've got a Tui Pelotu. We've got a Tuolangi and a Vela as a captain, 60s. Any connection there, Matilda Vela? Surely not.
No, I don't think so, but who knows?
There's also a Knowles.
Could
that be a relation to the former trainer Hayden Knowles? I don't know. Be fun to find out. But a couple of names there that are worthy of attention. And yes, and Elford playing in the centres, that almost is like a 1-to-1, right? That's got to be. But
you would think so. But John, last week I described the performance of the Tarsha Gale team, where I thought that they brutalised the Sharks.
Yep.
It was
physical,
the
fast, confrontational. Yep.
Yeah. Everything that the Sharks did to the Eels,
it was a complete
when they first played them
in round 5.
The Eels did, but gave a
bit
more.
of interest.
yeah, certainly a bit of interest. There was some contact there where I was just thinking, my goodness, what just the. It was almost like you described it a moment ago about them finding their identity. I was thinking along the same lines, because I was thinking that after that previous week, it was almost like maybe a light bulb moment where it was like, this is who we are and this is how we get wins.
We're big, we're strong, we're physical. Yeah, exactly. Yep.
And it was It was, I thought, like the week before, I thought was their best performance of the season. I thought that game against the Sharks outdid. It was over.
The game against the Bulldogs was spirit and it was energy and it was
Yes.
desperation. This was similar but with the polish, and it brought that extra element of the second phase play, which you saw Riverly Arlo tearing up the Sharks with, and she wasn't the only one actually. There was a couple of players that got some cracking offloads away. But yeah, and then you had the touch from the halves. I thought Aaliyah Sufan caught a great game from number 7. It's just this team is. They started the season so well, and then started second question themselves after that Sharks game. That really got into their heads. It felt like, and including a loss against a team they're taking on this week in the Panthers, where they went down. Was it 20-14 Sixties? I think it was something in that ballpark against the Panthers, and it was a real struggle for them that game.
Let's just call it what it is. That was probably their worst performance of the season, because I think it came on the back of that loss to the Sharks.
Correct.
And the loss for the Sharks, you could see that the Sharks deserved all the credit for that game because they took the game away from the Eels. The following week, the Eels turned up and it was like they didn't know what to do last tackle plays. And you mentioned before, like second-guessing themselves. That was perhaps the perfect way to describe their performance in that game, because it was a game without identity as a team. Like we've used this description with the NRL team earlier this year. They were like a group of people that didn't know each other. They were strangers to each other, had met just before they went onto the field. So there was no cohesion in what they did. In contrast, the last 2 weeks, and especially last week, what you saw was a team where everyone seemed to know what their role was.
Yep.
Like well and truly understand, not just know, but understand their role and then executing it. And they performed not as individuals, but as a great unit. Now, on reflection of the season, in the lead up to that defeat at the hands of the Sharks, the Eels had, with respect to the opponents that they had early in the season, it was a mismatch. And it was, I don't know that it was as much about how the Eels were playing, but how their opponents couldn't match them in either skill level, physicality, fitness. It just seemed to be a complete mismatch. And I don't know that necessarily did the team any good in retrospect. I think they got caught on the hop against the Sharks because that was the first opponent that had thrown something
coming
back
out of a
at
bye
them.
as well. Byes are,
Yeah.
I will stand by my belief that byes can be absolutely diabolical for junior teams. A lot of them really struggle with the loss of just not momentum as a winning team, but just the loss of week-to-week football. And you come out of rhythm, and I think that's what got them as much as not as much, but at least partially compared to the Sharks.
Now, I also have it in my head, and I'm not exactly sure which round it was, but around that time, they lost Aaliyah Scrivens.
Yes.
And she was playing on the wing, but she offered so much more as well. And I think she had been a significant out for the team. Now, I'll preface that also by saying that she hasn't been involved in the last 2 weeks. But I think, and it wasn't, her absence wasn't a factor in the Eels' form over the last 2 weeks because they did exceptionally well. But she's a big in. I think she's a big in because not only are you got a greater likelihood of conversions from the more difficult angles, and it doesn't mean she's going to sharpshoot from the sideline or what have you, but she's the most accomplished goal kicker in this team. And not only that, she's got a skill set that not a lot of players her age have. And we've seen her with the Gidley offloads,
Backhand flicks,
making breaks through the centre of so not just finishing moves, but making breaks through yardage carries, and then getting away miraculous passes. and these aren't flukes. These are offloads of the highest order. And it's interesting that she's in a little bit closer this week in playing at centre. And maybe it's just a case of, well, how do we fit her in? There's an opportunity to play her back in the team as a centre. So it might be as simple as that. But I think she's a big inclusion, and she's a big inclusion on a team which, as we said, has found their identity. And I expect that although the Panthers were seeded above the Eels in this final series, I have great confidence that this Eels team will continue to go on with the job. They get through this week, and I don't. Maybe I shouldn't get too far ahead, but they genuinely have one of the better lineups in this grade. I really believe that, John, and they showed that they are able to take on and defeat a team like the Bulldogs. So there's a lot to be said for this team. So I'll tip an Eels win.
Yeah, again, if they're playing the sort of football we've seen in the last fortnight, 60s, they're going to be very hard to beat. And that's true of any team in any grade. When you're playing, brash, confrontational, physical football, it just sets the tone. And it really asks a question of your opposition, how far are you willing to go to meet us when it comes to wanting this win? And
yeah, and one of the key things, John, for this team is you've referenced River Lee. You've also referenced Kylie Gray. Now, if the Eels, if you're one of their teammates, if you're someone who's playing outside them or inside them, you're making sure you're presenting yourself.
Push up
as
in
possible.
support. Yeah.
Push up in support. Yep, because there will be opportunities that come your way. And both of them have a number of tricks in their kit bag because they are both powerful runners of the football, but they've got those ball skills that go with them. So any Eels fans that watch these games will see that there will be a number of different ways that those girls will attack the line, but push up in support, because you can almost guarantee there will be opportunities at different times during the game that happens to be created by those two. So, to another extent as well, with Fontaine, because Fontaine, although she's slightly different sort of player to River Lee, she's a very similar build, and really provides that strike just on the edge. So you've got River Lee, who's sort of hunting around in the middle, but will also present herself on edges as well, even though she's a 13. And you might think, oh, there's a little bit more middle work for her. She's running edge lines constantly. So, I'm very comfortable in tipping an Eels win here, John, which then brings us to the main event. Well, we shouldn't say the main event, but it's certainly the only boys event now, with the elimination of the Harold Matts last week. It's only we've got both girls teams carrying the flag for the Eels, but we're down to one of the boys teams. The minor premiers, the previously undefeated SG Ball team, and they're taking on a Melbourne Storm team which has earned the right to go to the second week via a victory. So, I'll get you to run through the Eels team there, John.
I believe it is an unchanged Eels team from that loss last week, which means they look like this. At fullback, it's Cameron Bamblett. You've got Dom Ferrugia and Aiden Kaburian on the wings, with Aiden running that left sideline, Dom on the right. Anders Johansson and Nathan Howlett are in the centres. Likewise, Anders on the left, Nathan on the right there. Lorenzo Talatona and Lincoln Fletcher are the halves pairing. In the front row, we have Elijah Shane Tapa'u and Ryder Talangi as the 8 and 10. Lachlan Koinakis at dummy half. Josiah Funa Ayuta will run the right edge with Christopher Petrus on the left. Max Popo was a lock forward. Then on the interchange, Tom Summer, Wesley Picodi, Trace Beattie and Big Isaac Jim taking on a Melbourne Storm lineup. I do see a Howarth in their 60s, so I've got to imagine that's a younger brother of Jack and Frank. But that's about all I can see in terms of those surnames, or even just players we recognise from representative teams. So Eels, look, what's there to say here, 60s? Because they've been so good all year and then just had their worst 80 minutes, or 70 minutes, of their season in round one of the finals. We mentioned the terms ambush and shell shock earlier this podcast, and I think they were really the football definition of it in this game. Ambushed by the Roosters, shell shocked by their aggressive defense, and just could never get into a gear to take them on. And they showed glimpses in that game where they had a couple of tries where it looked like, all right, we're back in this. But then their defense struggled on the back of that sort of fatigue load that they took on earlier in the game. And they got to be better than that this week, mate. It is now sudden death football. They did not meet the Melbourne Storm this year, correct?
No, they haven't played.
So you're going in with only tape as your ally in terms of what to expect. You don't know the playing speeds of certain individuals and how fast they are getting around you or trying to get around you, and you know what they might do before contact. All those little things that you get a feel for when you take on a team. And the reverse is true too. This is the Parramatta's advantage as well. The Melbourne Storm are going to be able to review the tape and not necessarily know how dangerous Lorenzo Talatona is when he takes that jinking run down one side before switching play, and obviously across the park with the various Eels that all have their talents. But yeah, they can't afford that slow start again. They can't afford to drop the ball in the first set like they did against the Roosters. They can't afford to be pushing, silly offloads or not making their tackles. There is a lot that went wrong last week that they need to rectify in the space of 7 days.
Yes, I think it was a great reality check that they had last week because they were so far below their best. It was ludicrous.
You would have thought it was just a different team. Like if you didn't know that was those players that we'd seen all year playing, you would have thought that they'd been subbed out for a completely different team.
Yeah, look, I wanted to read through the stats from last week's game just to really point out what happened, what transpired, because we can talk about the errors and that sort of thing, but when you go through these numbers, it speaks for themselves. 41% possession last week, a 68% completion rate, just over 16 minutes in possession compared to 24 minutes in possession for their opponents. Both, there was this difference in the run meters. 930 run meters for the Eels, 1,538 to the Roosters.
Says a lot, mate.
Post-contact meters, well, it's about 200 meters difference in post-contact meters. Line breaks, 8-2 to the Roosters. Tackle breaks, 63 to the Roosters, 39 to the Eels. The average set distance, 29 metres to the Eels, just on 44 metres to the Roosters. And when it came to defence, well, 247 tackles the Eels had to make to the Roosters, 199. 63 missed tackles from the Eels. 63. This is a team that prided itself on its defence all season. To concede 32 points, let alone to lose by a deficit of 20 points when this was their only loss of the season. It wasn't a near thing. They got absolutely walloped in this game. All the stats tell you they all fit in perfectly with the scoreline. Like they match up. Like sometimes you get stats and you go, that belies that scoreline. How do the stats read that way with that sort of scoreline? Nah, this is like you read the stats and you go, yeah, that fits, that works. So there is not much more we can say about last week. What we need to have seen is that the Eels put that behind them. Did they get ahead of themselves? Arguably. Maybe they just thought that they would continue to do what they had been doing without having to work that little bit harder because it's finals football. I think they were delivered a lesson in finals football. Last year, and a number of these players were in the Harold Matts team, the Harold Matts team were undefeated going into the first week of the finals, but it was a 5-team final series from recollection last year.
Incredible.
So
yeah.
even though they were undefeated, they finished third on the table because the other two teams, there were two other undefeated teams, and we spoke about the vagaries of the draw last year, but the two teams that finished above them, the Eels played each of them during the season and had a draw against each of them
and
in the
season.
season.
They did not meet each other, yeah.
And those other teams did not have to meet each other during the regular season, which meant neither of them dropped any points against each other. If they had been drawn to play each other, then the Eels would have finished second and wouldn't have been facing that elimination in the first week. But because the Eels were drawn to play the Warriors ended up going not only disposing of the Eels, but they ran the gauntlet and beat all three undefeated teams on their way to taking out the title. The only problem for the Eels was they faced them in the first week, which meant instant elimination.
Yep.
So a lot of these players went through that last year, and there was something eerily familiar about the way that the two teams played. That the Eels last year looked a lot like how the Eels turned up in this particular finals match. And I think it was a most timely reminder about this is what finals football's about. It's not the same as what you've been playing all season. Your opponents are going to lift because they know that this is their opportunity to work towards winning a title. And as I said, they really got shown up last week by a Roosters team that deserved every bit of praise that would have come their way after the game. Now, conversely, this Eels team is a very good team. They're not undefeated, because they fluked their way through this season. They had developed during the year. It's why that first week of the finals was supporters were shell shocked. I'm sure the coach and the staff had to be shell shocked by what had happened because it was completely unexpected. They played so poorly. There was not any shred of evidence that this would happen based on what had transpired in the preceding 9 rounds. Yes, they had a draw when they last played the Roosters, and people might say, well, they might have been lucky to get away with the draw there. Well, the Roosters scored the late try in that game to even up the match, and the Eels might have been lucky to survive the last attacking raid. I think from memory in that game, it was it got a bit hectic right at the end.
It did.
Yeah, but by the same token, it was a draw. The Eels, I thought, had developed a lot since that game, though I think we were a stronger unit. But this just showed teams can have shockers, and the Eels had a shocker. So there's too much talent for them to have a shocker 2 weeks in a row.
Surely.
Look, I'm sure that Mitch Lewis, he'd be the sort of coach that he would have maintained his composure. He would have been delivering a firm message, reminding them about what their KPIs are, what their identity is, and their identity is as a physical defensive team first, and a team which can score tries almost out of the blue. But it starts with defence for this team. From the start of the year, they are physical. They work hard in defence. They take pride in protecting their try line. We saw none of that last week. They'll go back to that this week. Mitch Lewis will remind them of that. They've got the strike power that they can score those tries from anywhere. We've seen it happen. Like you were calling them the cardiac kids early in the season because they never, even when they were behind in games, they never believed they would get beaten, and they would find a way to score. And they weren't fluke scores. This was the team would genuinely find a way that they would win. Their resilience levels were through the roof. There was no resilience last week. So, John, how do you see them winning this game? And I'm assuming you see them winning.
Oh, yeah. Yes, it would be a bit outrageous, the tip of defeat for our boys. When the reality is that they have every shot of winning this title if they just get their heads back, like not even screwed on straight, just flush out what happened last week. Look, I think you laid it out there, Sixties, that they've won by being physical through the middle, and they've certainly got the strike across the park to ask absurd questions of their opposition. I mentioned Lorenzo earlier and his ability to challenge a defensive line of his real sharp footwork and speed, but that's true of a lot of the back line. Cameron Bambert's been good at fullback. Dom Ferrugia is a big physical boy near the goal line, wherever he's trying to burrow over from pass or going through the air, climbing the ladder, and being equally dominant in that regard. But yeah, Anders Johansson, Nathan Howard, both versatile, dynamic centres. So they've got the strikeout wide, but it's going to come down to the pack. And I think the pack got rattled last week. The Roosters were able to pin them or hem them inside their own quarter with utter, just terrifying consistency in the first half. And that means that guys like Elijah Shane and Lachlan Ryder, Petrus, Josiah, Max Popo, the starting five, not necessarily middles there because I'm putting in Josiah and Christopher there, but they've got to come in and roll their sleeves up and lay that platform. And if you get anything near an equal share of possession and equal share of territory on the back of the work they're doing, not even factoring in plus sort of numbers there, then Talatina and Fletcher, they will put the Eels on the front foot, and the rest of the team will come into the mix. So this comes down to the forwards and how much they want to set that platform. I truly think so, Sixties. I think that the rest of the team will fall in behind what those five starters can do from the forward pack.
Yeah, look, without question, you've got players who they've had to be versatile this year. They really have, because like Nathan Howlett started the season at fullback.
Yep,
he's been a success being moved to the centres. You've had Aiden Kaburians come in a number of times for injury. And the one thing you know about Aiden is he knows how to score a try. So he's filled in. We've got Larima Rokasuka, who's had a season-ending injury, but I don't think they've lost anything with Aiden coming in because of the fact that he's just, you talk about wingers that are professional wingers, and I think he's done a great job in that regard. But you talk about the strike power before, you mentioned it in the halves in Talatina and Fletcher. When they're at their most dangerous when the two of them link up on the same side of the field.
Yep.
And, because both of them they're a threat with their running game as much as they are with, putting their runners through gaps. And they just weren't on their game last week. So why is that? I think you nailed it there, that we didn't see the forwards win that physical battle. And unfortunately, it was in a finals game. Now, fortunately, it's the first week of the finals. And you can have a hiccup there because moving forward then, all of the matches are elimination finals, whether you were a winner or a loser. So they get through this week. They're in the same position as as the two teams that won in the first week of the finals, who advanced to the grand final qualifier. They might have won and got through the grand final qualifier, but if they lose in their next game, their season's over. So every team is in the same boat. Their next game is it. Win to progress, lose, you're gone for the year. So if they had won last week, they would have been in that same position in 2 weeks' time. Lose and you're gone for the year. So I think it would have given last week's loss would have given them a lot of opportunity for reflection, a lot of not just reflection, but I think it's a case of realising that it's not just going to happen. And I don't know whether it's an unfair thing to say that, you know, that maybe that might have been what was the problem, but you saw that there wasn't intensity about their performance last week right from the start, whereas there was plenty of that from the Roosters. So I think this is going to be one of those games where the Storm will feel how the Eels might be feeling about last week's loss, maybe an embarrassment that they might have felt, and they'll be looking to really be well and truly back on track with their performance this week. I'm expecting the Eels to be very, very physical this week, John. I'm expecting that the forwards are going to make a statement in this game, and if they make the sort of statement that we think they can, because you know whilst it's not a massive pack, it is still a strong. They are still physically strong, and then of course they can bring on the giant in Isaac Jim, who is a big unit.
Very big. He's a sizable human being.
Yeah. So look, John, it would be good if we'd seen something of the Storm this year. They have to be congratulated for being able to get, for really a non-league state to be able to put together an under-19s team that's in finals football. And when you've got a junior powerhouse like the Panthers, who can't get within cooey of the finals, you have to give some recognition for the Storm for what they've been able to achieve.
Snuck into the finals 2 and 8 spot, and then accounted for the Steelers pretty comfortably, 36-16 last week down in Wollongong as well. So the Steelers had the home field advantage well and truly there.
I noticed we got an Isako in.
It could be a relation to the Redcliffe winger. Yes,
we got a Howarth.
Yeah, I believe that would be a younger brother of Jack there. So Melbourne, a couple of connections there, but I saw Howarth, Izako, and then other guy. I mean, there's a Ham one, but it's not a Haminuele. And there's more generic names like Clark and whatnot. That could always be some rugby league connection. But yes, the big one that stands out is Frank Howarth, who also plays back row, which is where Jack started before flourishing in the centres. So
yes. So
can't take them lightly, 60s. Can't take them lightly.
No.
Dusted up the Steelers. And the Eels, in terms of pure talent, they could win this comp by some margin if they locked it in for the next 3 games. But the reality is that they're not going to play perfect football for 210 straight minutes in their 70-minute games that are in the SG Ball. So they've got to find a way to stay in, as locked in as possible, and not. The big thing they can't afford to do again is get beaten physically in the manner in which the Roosters did it, because you can be, if you're in a physical contest and the opposition's playing tough, fair enough, and you've got to find something to find that tie-breaking ability. Okay, you've got guys like Talatina and Fletcher and Koinakis in the spine. You've got aerial threats like Dom Ferrugia, or massive centre in Anders Johansson. You've got Josiah Funayuta, who is, an absolute physical phenom in the back row. There are options there. You can't afford to be behind the 8 ball like you were against the Roosters again, because you're not winning.
John, you say this all the time, and it's so true. At this level of football, if you have a high completion rate, you're going to go a long way. And I mean, it's true of all levels of football, but especially so in junior rep levels. If you have a statistically significant completion rate,
yep,
there is a chance that you're going to have a better completion rate than your opponent, because we do see a lot of errors that happen at this level of football because they are young players learning their craft. So if you can really get focused on those completions, and then it's just a matter of, it's like Rugby League 101. Win the forward battle, give a platform for your spine to unleash the backs. It's the Eels have arguably the best spine in this competition. They genuinely do. So if the forwards can win that contest, that they just weren't in, they weren't in the contest last week. In
No,
the physical,
they weren't.
Right.
No,
So, like, fellas, take it as a challenge.
exactly. Step up. And
Yep.
I think they're going to, like you said, Mitch Lewis will approach this game with the right methodology, with the right psychology. I think they're going to be fired up. And obviously there is a risk of going too far the other way and being too fired up, giving away early penalties because you're getting too ferocious in defence and either shooting up offside or making high contact. And you've got to navigate that too. But if they can just get back to the team that they've been for, I'd say at least the last 6 weeks of the regular season, let alone the entire season, because they had that one draw and that was it, that the Melbourne Storm will really struggle here. But by the same token, if they do start slow, if they do open the door, when you're suddenly chasing 6, 12, 14 points maybe, it puts a lot of pressure on the team. So they can't afford that again. And that's what really got to them.
Absolutely right. So, John, we're both tipping an Eels win. We're expecting the big bounce back with this. And that concludes our junior reps preview. Good luck to all the teams. Of course, you'll be able to follow the action on TCT, and whether you're watching a live stream or if you're out at the ground watching it, as we'll be doing as well, jump on the blog, add your opinions on what's happening, and we certainly love to read the takes of our TCT community about what's going down in the junior reps, because this, of course, is part of they are the future of the Eels senior teams in both the NRL and NRLW. So again, our thanks to Parramatta Leagues Club, the home of the Eels, for their support of junior rugby league. Their what they do for juniors in the Parramatta district is just phenomenal. And of course, we truly appreciate their support of what we do in our coverage of junior rugby league. So not just this podcast, but they're behind our live blogs that we do, and any of the special articles that we provide about junior rugby league. They're the people that are making it possible for us to do that. So thanks to Parramatta Leagues. John, thank you. Thank you to everyone who's listened to this. And in this big week of finals football, have to say it all the time anyway, but go you mighty Eels.